This is Link. Link is the main protagonist in the extremely popular video game franchise The Legend of Zelda. He is known for his courageous spirit, unmatched combat skills, and his iconic green tunic and cap. However, this iconic style is no ordinary outfit. Link is also known for having the deepest pockets in all of Hyrule, being able to fit the most absurd items in his pants like a classic bow and arrows, various pairs of boots, a Game Boy Advance, a ginormous metal ball, a Beyblade, a hammer that is quite literally double his size, and much more. Every single game has such a deep item roster for the hero to choose from, each new item having their own unique uses throughout the course of the game. With so many unique items, we ask the inevitable question: which items are the best in the franchise? In this video, I will be choosing the best item from every Zelda game and putting it on a list from worst to best. As previously mentioned, every item has its own unique usage in every game, and some didn't have as much time to shine as others did, so to make it fair, I made sure not to judge an item based on how frequently it was required in the game, with a few exceptions. With many recurring items like the hookshot, bow, or bombs, I made sure to only include them on the list once to avoid repetition. The picks on this list will be based on which items are the most fun to use in the moments when it's needed. Of course, making the picks for this list was very difficult as there are hundreds of options to choose from, so there will be a few honorable mentions that I'll mention throughout the course of the video. And of course, the mandatory opinion warning, as this list is my opinion. I know me mentioning that has triggered some people in the past for whatever reason, but I gotta throw it out there before we get going to avoid controversy. And on that note, let's rank the best item in every Zelda game. The first item on the list is child? Link, what are you doing with that kid? I don't think this is what the hero is supposed to do. Please take that kid out of your pants right now. Oh, we're returning him to his mom. Okay. Are we still the good guys after this? Joking aside, the child from Zelda 2 is undoubtedly one of the creepiest items in the entire franchise. Even if he doesn't do anything, the way Link just picks him up and I guess shoves him into his pocket is so odd to me. But since this little guy doesn't actually do anything, I'll pick another item instead. How about the boots? Because they turn Link into Zelda? Jesus. Time for an item from a game I really haven't put that much time into, that game being Triforce Heroes. If you've watched any of my previous videos, you'll know that I'm not a huge fan of the multiplayer Zelda games, largely due to the accessibility, or lack thereof, for the games if you don't have others to play with. But let's steer back in the item direction. My pick for this game is the Gust Jar. I actually really like the Gust Jar in almost every single game that it appears in. Using the wind to push things or people has always been a really goofy yet favorite mechanic of mine. But again, this game doesn't exactly do it for me, so I don't really have much else to say about it. One of the coolest things that Nintendo does is reference their other games in, their other games. We've seen this countless times with an 8-bit Link appearing in Mario 3D World and Mario and Luigi, Talon and Ingo in Ocarina of Time. We've even seen many of Mario's enemies make an appearance in various Zelda games, one of my favorites being the Chain Chomp, because he does this. And this is pretty cool. The Chain Chomp, or Bow Wow in Four Swords, is an item that you can pick up, resulting in a maniac Chain Chomp following right behind you. Something about a Chain Chomp following you on a leash like it's your pet is absolutely hilarious. This item is really useful as well, brutally murdering any enemy or ally that stands in your path. But he's kinda cute, so I guess it's okay. Making my choice for both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom was really difficult, as many know that these games don't really have unique items like the other games do, instead giving us abilities you can use at your own will at any point throughout the game. So instead of ranking an item in Breath of the Wild, I'm going to use one of the abilities you're given in the game since, they're the most similar thing to the items. My pick being Stasis. Stasis is a really interesting ability. Being able to freeze anything mid-movement was something we had never really seen before in the franchise. Along with being able to launch objects hundreds of feet into the air, this ability made for some really unique usages throughout the game. One of my favorites being that one shrine where you're basically playing golf with that big sphere. Though a great ability, I can't put it above any of the other items on the list. We finally arrived at the first iconic recurring item in the Zelda franchise, that being the boomerang, specifically from Phantom Hourglass. The boomerang was always a weird item to me. Most of the time you're not using the boomerang when you have an item like the hookshot or bow available instead, as they practically do the same thing as the boomerang, just slightly better. But the boomerang in Phantom Hourglass is completely different from most of the other games. Using the touchpad to create a path that the boomerang will follow was a really great twist on the iconic item, as most of the other games use some sort of aiming or lock-on mechanic to actually attack with the boomerang. Definitely one of the better uses for the often controversial DS controls. The medallions in A Link to the Past are one of the coolest items in the entire franchise. Why are they so cool? Well, because they go. Though they originated in A Link to the Past, the medallions have actually appeared in more than one Zelda game in the past, specifically the Quake medallion in Four Swords Adventures. I actually think the Four Swords version is a little bit cooler than A Link to the Past version as well, though they are very different, as one of the items you can use as many times as you like as long as you have the magic, and the other is a one-time use. I think it's pretty safe to say that the actual attack part is a lot cooler in Four Swords.
Boring!
It's literally a fucking nuke. The original Legend of Zelda for the NES might not have had the most interesting item roster in the franchise, but it was definitely a solid start, introducing many recurring items like the bombs, boomerang, and the flute. But my choice for the best item in Zelda 1 is the old faithful bow and arrow. Though not the most unique item since it's literally just a projectile, it is arguably the most iconic Zelda item in the entire franchise. I don't think Zelda 1 necessarily had the best bow and arrow, but you gotta give props to the OG. I know I mentioned earlier how I wasn't judging an item based on how important it was to the game, but the bow in Zelda 1 is literally the only way you can kill Ganon, so I guess that counts for something. Overall, a very iconic item that Nintendo loves to use in nearly every single game. The Whip from Spirit Tracks. It's always awesome when you can Indiana Jones yourself around a dungeon, and thanks to this whip, you can do just that. Using the corpse of a dead snake, Link can swing himself over gaps, and even attack certain enemies that he couldn't before. Wait a second. Why is the whip literally just a dead snake? Is it even dead? Oh my god. He's alive! There is definitely still life in those eyes. What the hell, Nintendo? This is not PETA approved. This is being reported to the government or something. Actually, I don't really care, because this item is really fun. Sorry, Snake. As previously mentioned, picking the best item in Tears of the Kingdom was a really odd choice. Similar to Breath of the Wild, it doesn't really have unique items like the other games do, so I decided to choose an ability instead, just like I did for Breath of the Wild. Tears of the Kingdom introduced 4 new main abilities that you can use throughout the game, all of which were actually really neat and really useful in their own situations. But my favorite of the bunch by far is Fuse. Fuse allows Link to, well, fuse things onto other things together? Or something, which can make for some really interesting combos. For example, you can fuse a spring to a shield and launch yourself into the air, or a dragon scale to your sword to use its elemental powers, which is my personal favorite fusion. The possibilities are nearly endless, with almost every single material having its own unique uses. I always thought there weren't enough weapons in the newer Zelda games relative to how huge the games were, and the fuse ability practically fixed it entirely. I guess technically this is an item that makes more items, so technically it has unlimited potential, which is counting for something, I guess. A Link to the Past has a really solid item roster, one of the most iconic in the entire franchise. I think there are a few solid options for the best item in this game, like the Pegasus boots, the medallions, hookshot, or even the more basic items like the bombs or bow and arrow. But my choice for this game was the Fire Rod, because it can completely eradicate any enemy from existence like your Captain Commander Yamamoto. But seriously, this item is incredibly useful. I'm really terrible at this game, so an item that insta-kills practically every enemy is always welcomed. Plus, magic is super cool, and shooting fire from a rod will never not be awesome. bombs.
A minute and a half to play. That's a bomb!
They had to be here somewhere, and here they are. Though a very simple item, they're incredibly useful in almost every single Zelda game, used to reveal secrets, break walls, and even terrorize civilians. Choosing what bombs were the best was very difficult. Though I don't necessarily think these are the best bombs of them all, they're definitely up there and very useful in the game, that game being Ocarina of Time. They're fun, they go boom, what's not to love? Honestly, there's not much else I can say about this item or items. An incredibly iconic tool in an incredibly iconic game. The Pegasus boots from Link's Awakening are friggin' sweet because there's some fresh kicks that make you go super fast, which is actually really useful when the game doesn't have many easily accessible fast travel points. The Pegasus boots have appeared in numerous 2D Zelda games, but I think Link's Awakening is one of, if not my favorite version of the item, specifically in the HD version, because I will not lie, having the Pegasus boots as an equipable item to your A or B button and not to another button accessible at all times is really annoying. Luckily, the HD version fixed that completely, as well as adding a brand new super cool animation and some awesome pitter-patter footsteps, which are basically ear drugs. Yes, I love it. One of my favorite things about this item, however, is that you can combo it with the Rock's Feather to make Link jump some pretty insane distance. The Rock's Feather is also my honorable mention for this game, but I didn't include that because, well, I'll let you figure that out later. Speaking of the Rock's Feather, let's talk about the Switch Hook, which isn't at all related, I just didn't know how to make a better transition. The Switch Hook is one of the most unique items in the entire franchise. It works very similar to the hookshot. Instead of pulling Link, it switches Link with the target item. It's fun, and actually makes for some pretty fun puzzle solving. Believe it or not, but using this item actually makes you use your head a lot to try and get to the right position when swapping with certain targets. A super sweet item and one of the most unique in the entire franchise. I love A Link Between Worlds. A lot. And a large reason for that is due to the fat item roster that this game has. Items are one of the most interesting parts about this game. In other Zelda games, you'd find your important items within a dungeon. Well, A Link Between Worlds decided to flip that script completely. Instead of finding the items in a dungeon, you rent or buy them from this purple bunny guy named Ravioli. I know many may not love this feature, but I actually find it really neat and a nice change for the traditional format. Nearly every single item in this game is great. You've got your classic bows, bombs, boomerangs, magical rods, and that's not even mentioning the nice versions of them. But my choice for this game is an item that originated from A Link Between Worlds, the Tornado Rod. I want to give a quick shout out to the Sand Rod as well, which is probably my number 2 option behind the Tornado Rod. I just like the Tornado Rod a little bit more. Going vertical in a 2D Zelda game will never not be fun. While quite different from the Rock's Feather and other 2D Zelda titles, it's the same gist. It's a tornado that launches Link into the air. Enough said. This item is required to beat the game's second dungeon, the House of Gales, which for some reason is one of my favorite 2D Zelda dungeons ever. I have no clue why, I just love it. I guess a large reason for that is the use of this item, which is arguably best utilized in the dungeon's boss fight against this guy. A really enjoyable fight which has Link flying on top of him to hit his very suspicious looking eyeball weak point. This item rocks and is easily one of my favorite in the entire franchise. Gloves in Zelda games are usually pretty lame, often utilized to pick up really heavy stuff or to dig underground. Fortunately, this is not the case in Oracle of Seasons. I'm talking of course about the magnetic gloves. For some reason, the Oracle games had the most weirdly creative items in the entire franchise. The magnetic gloves are pretty self-explanatory. They're magnetic, allowing Link to push or pull himself away from certain metal blocks, which was an idea best utilized in the Unicorn's Cave, the dungeon where the gloves are found. The puzzles in this dungeon are some of my favorite in the entire game. Suspending yourself over pits and waiting for the perfect opportunity to switch platforms was really unique for a 2D setting. Unfortunately, the boss fight that the gloves are required for is one of my least favorite in the entire franchise. Fuck you, Dig Dogger. I hate you. Kicking off the top 5, we have an item that was way ahead of its time. The Deku Leaf from Wind Waker. And by that, I mean it was the paraglider before the paraglider. Prior to Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, it was the only item that allowed Link to freely glide wherever you wanted. The leaf has 2 main functions, that being the previously mentioned gliding, as well as this wind gust attack thing. Despite not being an actual dungeon item, this item is really fun to use in the Wind Temple. If you put 2 and 2 together, I'm sure you can understand why. This item allows for a lot of creativity, but more importantly, freedom when exploring nearly any location in the game. Freedom. Yes. Also, the Skull Hammer is really silly and a lot of fun. If you couldn't piece it together earlier, the reason I didn't include the Rock's Feather as the best item in Link's Awakening was because I thought the Rock's Cape from Minish Cap was a lot better. Technically not the same item, but they do basically the exact same thing, so I decided to group them together. This item basically combines the Pegasus Boots and Rock's Cape combo that I had previously mentioned, allowing Link to clear further distances by gliding for a short period of time after his jump. This item is the biggest highlight of Palace of Winds by far. Jumping from one platform to another in order to progress throughout the dungeon was a lot of fun. This item is also really practical in other areas of the game. It comes in handy when in combat scenarios and even for moving around the map a little bit quicker. And a whole lot cooler. The ability to jump in a 2D Zelda game will always be awesome, but the ability to fly like Superman? Now we're talking. The spinner from Twilight Princess is the definition of a great item but bad use time. Is that even a saying? I just totally made that up right now. Well, it's a saying now, I just invented that. The spinner is one of the most enjoyable items to use in the entire franchise. A really goofy idea, but somehow it works. Climbing on tracks and jumping from one to another was a ton of fun, especially in the Stalord boss fight, which is easily one of the best boss fights in the entire franchise just because of this item. Smashing his vertebrae weak point while avoiding the zombie dudes he summoned felt like a minigame, but this time, it's deadly. The worst part of this item is how Nintendo decided to f it over. Aside from the Arbiter's grounds, there are practically no places to use the spinner, which is a real shame because this item is really fun. Despite the limited uses of this item, it's definitely enough to be one of my favorite items in the entire franchise. The spinner is awesome. Wait a minute. Spin.
なんて遠い回り道。完全なる黄金の回転エネルギー。ありがとう、ジャイロ。
Out of the countless items the Zelda series has seen over the many installments, the masks in Majora's Mask are undoubtedly the most unique of them all. So obviously my pick for the best item in Majora's Mask is gonna be a mask, but which one? The bunny hood is practical, as well as the bomb mask and even the Camaro mask, which does this? Awesome, I guess. Though 3 masks stick out a lot more than the rest, those being the 3 main transformation masks. Well, technically there are 5 transformation masks, these are the 3 main of them, those being the Deku, Goron, and Zora mask. But my favorite of the trio has always been the Goron mask. First off, the Gorons frickin' rock. Second, you can roll on the ground super fast like your Sonic. Third, the cutscene is really sad and super touching. And fourth, you can hit things with your butt. That is awesome. Out of all the masks in the game, the Goron mask was the one I found myself using the most, whether it be in a required location like Snowhead Temple or just for an easy way to travel across the map. It's the mask for all occasions, except swimming. Don't go swimming and you're wearing this mask. You will die. I also want to give a quick shout out to the Fierce Deity mask, which is probably my favorite mask in the entire game and arguably my favorite item in the entire franchise, but the limitations put on it, that being that you can only use it in boss fights and boss rooms, made it impossible for me to put it over the Goron mask and my pick at number 1. Speaking of my pick at number 1... Alright, let's be honest. We all knew what item was going to be at number 1. Maybe even before clicking on the video. The best item in the history of The Legend of Zelda is Skyward Sword's Beetle. Ow. Just kidding, it's the claw shots. A very basic pick, I know, but you can't go wrong with an item that lets you zip around like you're Spider-Man. Just for clarification, I put every single iteration of the hookshot and claw shot together because they are literally the same thing, which is why I didn't pick the hookshot before for another game. And yes, the switch hook is different. This does not switch. Case in point. But seriously, this item is a staple in the Zelda franchise. A grappling hook that can pull Link towards his target is so friggin' sweet. And I honestly do think that Skyward Sword has the best iteration of the hookshot due to, hear me out, the motion controls. I thought this item is 1,000 times better with motion controls, which I know is probably a hot take, but my mind is set. There is not a single game that this item is in where it isn't a contender for the best item, and honestly any version of the hookshot could have been my number 1 pick. And I know this isn't a crazy pick or anything, but I had to do it. I'm really hoping we get more items like the hookshot to make a return in the next Zelda game. A great item that you really can't go wrong with. The claw shots from Skyward Sword are the best item in all of The Legend of Zelda. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more Zelda content just like this. Thank you all for the continued support. It means so much to see that you guys are enjoying the content. If you want to keep up with the channel, be sure to turn on post notifications and keep an eye on the community tab where I post channel updates or important events coming up in the future quite frequently. Thanks again for watching the video. I'll see you guys in the next one.